diners pulled back their seats as if the child's pain were contagious. "Get him under control," hissed a woman in pearls. By the entrance, Paul Langford's jaw tightened. The billionaire CEO, accustomed to moving markets with a word, looked suddenly helpless. He reached for his son, but the boy flinched, screaming louder. The manager hurried over, flustered, lowering his voice to a whisper meant to shame. "Sir, perhaps you should take him outside. He's disturbing the other guests." Paul's face hardened. "He just needs to calm down." No one stepped forward. Not the host, not the waitstaff, not a single diner. Until, from the far side of the room, a black waitress in a plain white apron set down her tray and quietly crossed the floor. Toward the boy, everyone else avoided. This is Black Stories, where the pain of prejudice is told and justice always finds its voice. If you believe dignity shouldn't depend on status, tap like and subscribe now. Because in the next few minutes, you'll see how a single quiet act of compassion by the one person nobody noticed shook a billionaire to his core and changed a boy's life in a way no amount of money ever could. His name was Theo Langford, 10 years old, autistic, and currently trapped beneath a linen-draped table like it was the last island in a flooding world. The chandelier above stabbed light through the glass, fracturing into 1,000 shards. Too bright. The piano's G above middle C rang sharp. Too loud. The air reeked of lemon polish and truffle oil. Too strong. Theo's palms pressed tight against his ears. His breath came in staccato bursts, the kind that leave your chest burning. 30 seconds. A waiter muttered, "Some kids aren't made for fine dining." A couple scooted their chairs away so far they nearly toppled. Theo's pupils blew wide. He tried to rock, to find rhythm, to find safe. The thing his occupational therapist called his anchor. Except his anchor wasn't here. Not the weighted blanket, not the headphones, not the soft string of silicone beads he chewed when the world attacked faster than he could name it. Across the room, Paul Langford, net worth headlines, magazine covers, a face people stood straighter for, looked nothing like the photographs. He looked like a father losing ground. He had promised himself tonight would be simple. Theo's first grown-up dinner after months of progress. A quiet booth, celebratory crème brûlée, a new memory that didn't hurt. Then the pianist launched into an up-tempo standard. A champagne cork exploded, flashbulbs popped for a minor celebrity at the next table, and the scaffolding of routine collapsed. 40 seconds. The manager leaned in again, whispering as if compassion were bad for business. "Sir, if you'd like, we can bring your dessert to go." On another night, Paul might have accepted the face-saving exit. Tonight, shame strangled him. He'd spent years converting feelings into spreadsheets. He couldn't spreadsheet this. "He just needs a minute," he said, voice flat, defensive. The word needs grazed something tender in him he refused to show. Under the table, Theo's fingers searched for pattern. Soft, hard, soft, cloth wood cloth. He hissed when he found only cold chair legs. His brain begged for one familiar input. 1. He curled tighter, a small planet shrinking its orbit. At the periphery, moving against the current, a waitress set down her tray and wiped her hands on an apron already clean. Her name was Nia Johnson. The other servers called her a runner because she ran doubles, because she ran interference, because she ran late to community college classes 3 nights a week. The regulars didn't know her name. They called her Miss, or worse, You. She'd learned to make herself small enough to slip past assumptions and large enough to hold a whole room together when it was crashing. 60 seconds. The shift lead hissed from the service alley. "Nia, leave it." Table 12 is on a VIP comp translation. Do not be the black waitress at the center of a rich man's problem. Nia's jaw flexed. She had grown up decoding rooms like this, how status moved, who mattered, who didn't. She'd watched her little brother Maliki melt down in public too many times to count, when fluorescent lights and strangers' perfume were a minefield. She knew the script. Glares, whispers, someone calling security, her mother apologizing to a world that demanded quiet from a boy whose nervous system was a live wire. She remembered the security guard who called her brother disruptive instead of overwhelmed. She remembered putting her own body between Maliki and the stare that said problem. 90 seconds. Nia slid a folded black bar towel from her apron, a trick she'd learned long before the restaurant. Dim the light, damp the glare, build a tent of shade. She glanced at Paul. "May I help?" she asked, voice steady, palms open, not touching, not assuming, just asking. Paul's eyes flicked over her, skin, apron, name tag, as if searching for her job description before her humanity. Reflex more than malice. "No," he said too fast. "We're fine." Theo's cry answered him. "Not fine." Heads turned. A phone rose, hunting for spectacle. Nia didn't flinch. "I won't touch him," she said softly, kneeling so she was smaller than Theo's fear. "Just going to make it darker." Quieter. She lifted the edge of the tablecloth and let the towel bridge a pocket of shadow, a tiny cave, a boundary. She repeated the rhythm she used with Maliki. Narrate, don't invade. "I'm going to set the towel right here. No one will come in your space. You're safe." 2 minutes. The pianist paused mid-phrase. A ripple of annoyance slid across the room. The manager cleared his throat. "This is highly irregular." Nia's eyes never left the boy. "What's his anchor?" she asked Paul, as if the word should live in every adult's mouth. "Noise canceling? Chew string? Weighted?" It landed like a challenge wrapped in care. Paul swallowed. He had forgotten the headphones. He hated himself for it. Theo's breaths hiccuped. Nia lowered her voice until it was almost a hum, shaping sounds that weren't words so his brain could grab cadence before meaning. 3 notes. Repeat." She kept her face turned away, no eye contact to overload him, and placed a bread basket near the tent's entrance, pulling out the soft center, tearing it into rhythmic pieces. Pattern. Soft, soft pause. Soft, soft pause. She set a small ramekin down. Plain warm water, then slid a small silicone chew bead from her apron pocket and laid it gently near his fingers. "You can bite this if you want," she murmured, keeping her voice low and steady, slid it within reach, then froze so he could decide. 30 more seconds. A woman in pearls scoffed. "She's feeding him bread under the table?" Another diner muttered, "If that were my kid, I'd..." and trailed off when Nia's manager shot her a warning glare. Do not escalate the high-tipping table. Nia kept narrating the world into safety. "The lights are softer now. The room is farther away. Your space is yours." One of Theo's hands flickered free, hovered over the bread, retreated, hovered again. Nia didn't move. Didn't chase. Space is a language. And she spoke it. Under the linen, Theo's fingers found the towel edge. Texture. Edge anchor. He rubbed it, slow. The hum in his throat shifted from jagged to low. He reached for the warm water, touched the lip of the cup, pressed, released, pressed, released, regulating with repetition. Paul sagged an inch. "How did you—" Nia cut him a small look. "You learn to hear what rooms don't." He didn't know what to do with that. He only knew the room had quit breathing like it wanted his son gone. Then from the host stand, A new threat. Flash. Someone was filming. The manager hissed, "Sir, please, no recording." The phone lowered, but the damage was done. Shame vaulted back into Paul's chest. He started to reach again. Instinct, fix, control. And Theo flinched so hard his foot hit a chair leg, metal screeching against marble. Nia lifted a hand 1 inch, not to stop Paul, just to slow him. "Ask before entering his space," she murmured. "Always ask." Paul stared at her. This waitress who seemed to know a map of his son he had never been given. The part of him built on appearances bristled. The part that was all father-bled gratitude he didn't know how to voice. Theo's breathing evened to a wobbly rhythm. Nia slid a cloth napkin between the table leg and the marble. No more scraping if he kicked again. A small fix that saved a big sound. She hummed the 3-note pattern once more and watched his shoulders drop 1/2 inch. A victory only people who've lived this recognize. She shifted just enough to catch Paul's eye and said, barely above a whisper, "Dignity isn't a privilege." In the corner, a couple rolled their eyes. The manager glared like she'd mutinied. A second waitress whispered, "She's going to get written up." And still, Nia stayed, building a little island no one else had tried to build. Theo touched the bread at last. Soft, soft. Pause. The room's pulse thinned from panic to possibility. And for the first time since the meltdown began, Paul let out the breath he'd been holding. And listened. The meltdown had ended hours ago. But the whispers hadn't. The Langford's dinner had gone viral before dessert even arrived. Grainy phone video of a billionaire's son screaming under a table, of a black waitress kneeling calmly in the corner, humming low like a secret song while the room looked on. Clips of Theo's small hand finding the edge of a towel had racked up 1 million views overnight. The restaurant's PR posted a 2-line statement. "We support all our guests and staff." The comments tore it apart. And yet, by the next evening, the dining room was full again. The chandeliers still glowed. The wine list still whispered exclusive. The world moves on until it doesn't. Nia was back on shift. She felt the weight of eyes that wouldn't quite meet hers. The other waitresses didn't speak as she tied her apron. One muttered just loud enough for the kitchen runner to hear, "Hope we don't get another scene tonight." Someone snickered, 30 seconds. A couple at table 6 eyed her like she carried trouble in her tray. The maitre d', whose smile always stopped just short of kindness, murmured as she passed. "VIP's here again. Langford. Behave." Luis at the bar caught Nia's eye and lowered the music slider 2 notches. Paul Langford had returned. Not because he wanted to, because he couldn't stop replaying the sound of his son's ragged breathing and the waitress's steady hum that had soothed it. He'd told himself he was coming back to thank her. He had also told himself he would keep control of the evening this time. He entered with Theo, who clutched the soft edge of the very same bar towel in one hand, like a lifeline. Paul's stride was confident, his gaze fixed ahead, until he saw Nia across the room. 45 seconds. For the briefest moment, his expression tightened. Not anger, not gratitude. Something closer to confusion. A man who had spent his life building a world where his money solved things had been confronted, in front of strangers, with the fact that it hadn't. The manager swept in, syrupy-voiced. "Mr. Langford, so good to see you again. We've prepared a quieter table tonight." The undertone was clear. "We'll keep your son from ruining anyone's meal." Paul nodded stiffly. Nia caught the exchange as she passed with a tray of sparkling water. She didn't slow, but her jaw set. 60 seconds. 2 women at the corner booth whispered behind their menus. Is that the waitress? The one who... I'd have called security. The words were low but sharp enough to slice. Nia kept her focus on the rhythm she always used to survive double shifts. Step set serve. Breathe, repeat. But she felt the tension in the air as thick as the linen tablecloths. Every clink of glass sounded like judgment. Every flash of a phone camera felt like a threat. At the table, Theo sat very still, clutching the towel. Nia noticed his foot tapping against the chair rung. Too fast, too light. A signal she recognized. The room was getting loud again for him, even if no one else heard it yet. 90 seconds. The pianist, eager to prove last night was an anomaly, started a lively piece. Theo flinched. Paul raised a hand to signal for a lower volume, but didn't call the song off. Old habits. Keep up appearances. Nia, passing by with a tray, caught Theo's shrinking posture. She glanced at Paul, then at the pianist. Her eyes said what her voice didn't. You can stop this before it starts. Paul caught the glance. For a heartbeat, his pride and his instinct for his son wrestled. Pride lost. He lifted a hand. The pianist slowed to a gentler melody. Theo's fingers eased a fraction on the towel. 120 seconds. The shift lead hissed from the alley near the bar. Keep your head down, Nia. Management's looking for an excuse to call you a distraction. Nia didn't answer. She served water to table 6. Her steady hand didn't tremble as she poured. Across the room, Paul noticed. He also noticed the way the manager hovered near them, as if Nia might embarrass the establishment again. And for the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his features. Doubt not in her, but in the system he had assumed worked. 150 seconds. The tension in the dining room wasn't from Theo anymore. It was the slow burn of class and color grinding against dignity. The stakes had shifted. Last night, Nia had been a quiet hero in a crisis. Tonight she was being framed as the risk, by the very place that had stood frozen while a child melted down. Theo picked at his bread again, following the pattern she had taught him. Nia passed by and lowered a small ramekin of water onto the table without breaking stride. His shoulders eased another inch. Paul looked at her, really looked this time, past the apron, past the roll. And for the first time, he wondered if the most valuable person in the room wasn't on the guest list. The status quo of wealth versus service, privilege versus patience, was cracking. And everyone in that chandelier-lit room could feel it, though not all of them liked it. The dining room was full again. The chandeliers hummed with soft light. Cutlery chimed against fine porcelain. But under the polish, the air was brittle, stretched tight as if everyone remembered the video. Nia felt it in her spine as she moved between tables. She had worked through rowdy sports nights, weddings gone wrong, even power outages. But nothing made a room feel heavier than waiting for a child to lose control again. Theo sat at the quiet corner table beside his father, shoulders hunched, towel clutched in one hand. He wasn't loud. He wasn't doing anything at all, just existing. And somehow, that was enough for the wrong people to tense up. 30 seconds. At the next table, a couple leaned toward each other, whispering. Is that the boy? Mm-hmm. The one from the video? The man chuckled softly. They should have hired a specialist instead of bringing him here again. Nia caught the words as she refilled their water. She didn't flinch, didn't let her hand shake. She'd learned long ago that the hardest part of compassion wasn't action. It was patience in the face of ignorance. 45 seconds. At another table, a white waitress, Brittany, new to the staff, trying too hard to impress the manager, muttered just loud enough for the bartender to hear. Bet he's gonna start screaming again. Shouldn't be in a place like this. The bartender snorted, neither agreeing nor defending. Paul Langford heard it too. His jaw tightened, but he didn't turn around. For most of his life, he'd been the kind of man who could buy silence. Tonight, for the second time in as many nights, he was realizing money didn't shield his son from judgment. 60 seconds. Theo's fork slipped and clinked against the plate. His body stiffened, eyes darting towards the sound. Nia noticed instantly. She was already gliding by with a tray, her tone low, soft, steady. "You're okay, Theo." "Just a noise." The boy's shoulders eased, but the couple at the next table sighed audibly. "Here we go," the woman muttered. 75 seconds. The manager, stiff-collared and always polite for the wrong reasons, stepped close to Paul. He lowered his voice, but not enough that Nia, setting down a plate nearby, couldn't hear. "Mr. Langford, perhaps your son would be more comfortable dining. Privately. We have a lounge upstairs." Paul's hand twitched on the tablecloth. "He's fine where he is." The manager smiled, the kind of smile that hid a wince. "Of course, we only want everyone to enjoy their meal. 90 seconds. Theo flinched again, this time at the burst of laughter from the bar. He covered his ears. The sound triggered a tremor through his whole small frame. Nia knelt slightly beside him, kept her voice a near whisper. "Breathe with me. In. Out." Theo followed, shaky but willing. It was the kind of quiet intervention that often went unnoticed, except tonight, when all eyes were hungry for spectacle. 120 seconds. Brittany carried a tray past and, under her breath, said to another waitress, "This isn't a daycare." Guests shouldn't have to sit through this. The words pricked the air like a needle. Theo's breathing hitched. His fingers dug into the towel. Paul's eyes flashed at Brittany, but the glare faded before it became words. Pride was still fighting instinct. 150 seconds. A man in a navy blazer at the far table decided to speak what others were thinking. "This is ridiculous. I paid for a fine dining experience, not..." He didn't finish the sentence. But the word he didn't say hung there, unspoken and ugly. Theo's breath sped up. He slid lower in his chair, hands over his ears now, rocking lightly. Nia saw it all unfolding, the way a storm builds at sea. She didn't ask permission. She crossed to their table, crouched slightly to Theo's level. Her tone was soft, steady, but carried enough to quiet the surrounding whispers. "Hey, Theo, remember the counting we practiced yesterday? Let's do it together. 1, 2, 3. His rocking slowed. The man in the blazer shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of the phones discreetly raised at nearby tables. 180 seconds. The manager's voice, sharp with embarrassment, cut across the room. "Nia, perhaps you should let the parents handle their child." Paul's head turned sharply at that. "She's doing just fine," he said, voice low but edged with steel. A hush rippled across the tables. For the first time, Paul Langford had publicly pushed back, not at his son, not at the situation, but at the subtle prejudice simmering beneath the restaurant's polish. Nia met Paul's gaze for a heartbeat. It wasn't a look of triumph, just steady understanding. Two adults realizing the battle that night wasn't Theo's meltdown. It was the room's intolerance. And as the tension hung like a wire pulled too tight, one thing became clear to everyone watching. The real disruption wasn't the boy. It was the compassion that refused to sit down and stay silent. The dining room had gone from chatter to hush to a sharp-edged silence. Theo's cries ricocheted off the crystal chandeliers, too raw for the velvet hush of the lounge. Cutlery stilled. Someone muttered, "Can't they control him?" The manager's voice, tight with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, whispered to Paul, "Sir, maybe you'd prefer to take your meal to the car. We have other guests to think of." Paul's jaw tightened. He looked like a man who wanted to bark back, yet behind his eyes was a flicker of helplessness. He'd been here before. The stares, the sighs, the subtle recoil whenever Theo's world got too loud. Then the manager barked at the nearest server, "Miss, escort them out." Nia didn't move. The black waitress, still holding her tray against her apron, crouched instead, right there on the carpet, to Theo's eye level. The room murmured in disapproval. Paul blinked in surprise. She didn't try to hush him. She simply began to hum, a low, steady tune, old-fashioned, carrying over the clink of glasses. An old gospel lullaby her grandmother used to sing. At first, Theo's rocking didn't slow. Then his eyes shifted, not at the room full of staring strangers, but at Naya's face. The screaming ebbed to soft hiccups. The boy leaned toward the hum like a moth drawn to warmth. Paul's breath hitched. For a man who commanded boardrooms, he suddenly looked like a father watching a miracle he couldn't buy. A diner lowered his phone. Another dabbed her eyes. But the manager snapped, louder this time. "Ma'am, that's unprofessional. Step away. This is a 5-star restaurant." Naya stayed kneeling. Her voice stayed even. Sometimes 5 stars means remembering the people, not just the plates. For the first time, the billionaire turned fully toward her. No bark of authority, just a quiet, almost broken, How did you know to do that?" Nia's answer was soft but carried. "My brother's on the spectrum." The hum calmed him when words couldn't. The whole room shifted. Prejudice, just for a breath, gave way to recognition. But the manager's scowl deepened, and his next words promised the conflict was far from over. For a few seconds, it felt as if the whole restaurant was holding its breath. Then the manager broke the fragile hush like a snapped string. "Enough of this," he snapped, striding toward Nia. His shoes slapped the marble like a gavel. "This is a fine dining establishment, not a daycare. You're disrupting our guests." Nia didn't rise. She stayed at Theo's side, one hand gently rubbing the boy's shoulder in slow circles. Her voice stayed even. "Sir, he wasn't disrupting anything until people started staring." A ripple of murmurs shot through the tables. A woman at the back whispered to her companion, "She's right." Paul Langford straightened in his chair. The man who could freeze an entire boardroom with a single look now looked caught between fury and shame. He cleared his throat. "Manager, that's enough." But the man cut him off, the thin respect of a service worker hiding a barely veiled bias. "With respect, Mr. Langford, your son needs specialized care. We have other guests to consider." Theo flinched at the raised voice and started rocking again. The hum Nia had been whispering faltered. Phones went up, screens glowing. Someone muttered, "Here we go." Paul's face hardened. "Put your phone down," he barked at the nearest diner. But another patron scoffed. "If the boy can't behave, maybe he shouldn't be here." That was the spark. Naya rose to her feet, not hurried, not loud, but with a steadiness that made people lower their forks. She faced the manager squarely. "His name is Theo," she said, voice clear enough for every phone mic to catch. "He's not a problem to remove. He's a person. He deserves to eat here like anyone else." Gasps rippled. The manager's face flushed. "You're out of line. You're a server. Do your job and leave the parenting to..." To people like you? Nia's eyes flashed. The ones who think dignity is a privilege you can deny when it's inconvenient? Paul blinked. For a moment, the billionaire looked as if someone had finally said what he'd been too afraid to admit. That he'd let people treat his son like an inconvenience for years. The manager raised a finger at Nia. You're finished here. That's when Paul finally stood. The murmurs hushed instantly. The silver-haired tycoon's voice came low but carried to every corner. No, she's not finished. You are. A stunned silence. Even Theo, still leaning against Nia, stilled as if sensing the shift. Paul stepped closer, his words deliberate. For years, I've been told my son is too much. I thought wealth could shield him. I let that lie blind me. His eyes swept the room, the diners, the manager, even the waitstaff who had hung back in awkward silence. Tonight I saw more courage in this waitress than in any boardroom I've ever sat in. She treated my son like a human being while the rest of you treated him like a disruption. The phones were recording every word now. No one dared interrupt. Paul turned back to Nia. Thank you for being there when I wasn't. Nia's lips trembled just slightly, but she held her ground. Every child deserves a safe table, sir. Even here. The room felt different, heavier, quieter, as if the chandeliers themselves were listening. Then the manager muttered under his breath. This isn't how we run a five-star establishment. Paul's gaze snapped to him. Maybe that's the problem. The crowd exhaled collectively, a mixture of relief and awe, and the story that would dominate headlines the next morning was already being recorded on a dozen phones. The night a billionaire sided with the black waitress who dared to kneel on the carpet for his son. By the next morning, the restaurant's polished chandeliers weren't the only thing glittering. It was every phone screen in the city. The clip had spread overnight, a shaky but clear video of a black waitress crouched beside a boy mid-meltdown while wealthy diners recoiled. And then the moment when the billionaire father stood up for her. The caption that went viral first was blunt. Dignity isn't a privilege. Watch the billionaire learn it the hard way. On Twitter, hashtags shot to the top within hours. Hashtag stand with Theo. Hash compassion over privilege. # dignity is not a luxury. One post racked up millions of views in less than a day, a split screen of 2 frames. In one, Theo flinching as the manager raised his voice. In the other, Nia's steady hands guiding him through the panic. The caption, guess who acted with class tonight? Hint, it wasn't the one in the tux. Every replay caught the exact second Paul Langford said, thank you for being there when I wasn't. Commenters pounced. A billionaire admitting failure in public. Save this moment. Protect this waitress at all costs. The restaurant's PR team scrambled. By noon, they'd issued a bland statement. We regret the incident and will review staff training. It backfired. Screenshots surfaced of online reviews, old complaints about how special needs families were treated. People began posting their own stories. A mother shared, we stopped going there after a server told us our son's stimming distracted the guests. The firestorm wasn't just online. News vans parked outside the restaurant by evening. Staff sneaked out through the side door. Reporters swarmed the main entrance, shoving microphones toward every customer who walked in or out. And in the middle of it all, Nia stayed quiet. She didn't grant interviews. She still showed up for her next shift until the manager tried to suspend her for causing disruption. That backfired too. A local anchor went live outside the restaurant with breaking news. Eyewitness accounts confirm Nia Johnson, the waitress seen comforting Theo Langford, has been suspended. Customers are calling for a boycott. Paul Langford's office released a statement of its own that evening. Not through PR, not through lawyers, through his personal social media account. Compassion should never be punished. My son deserves dignity, and so does the woman who gave it to him when we all failed to. Off camera, Paul called an emergency meeting with the chain's board. By week's end, those calls would change who set the rules. That post hit 1 million likes in 4 hours. By the end of the week, the company placed the manager on leave pending investigation. By week's end, he was out. The restaurant chain announced new training programs on inclusivity. Reporters still camped outside, this time hoping to catch Nia on her way in. But Nia stayed the same, quiet, composed, and focused on her tables. When asked by a young reporter why she refused the spotlight, she simply said, "Theo needed someone to see him. I was there. That's enough." And just like that, the story shifted again. The hero wasn't the billionaire who apologized. It wasn't the internet for going viral. It was the waitress who had knelt down on a polished floor and reminded the world that compassion is not charity, it's humanity. The restaurant that once prided itself on exclusivity was unrecognizable a month later. Gone were the velvet ropes and cold stares at the door. In their place stood a small brass plaque by the entrance. Every guest deserves dignity. Every child deserves patience. That plaque wasn't the PR team's idea. It was Paul Langford's. He stood quietly at a small press gathering outside the restaurant one morning. No tuxedo, no entourage. Just a man with silver-streaked hair, a folded speech in his hand, and his son Theo leaning gently against his side. The reporters jostled for position. Paul didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The cameras caught every word. "I built businesses thinking reputation was everything," he began. "But that night, in this very dining room, I learned reputation is hollow without compassion. I realized that real change couldn't be left to statements or temporary outrage. That's why, last week, I purchased controlling interest in this restaurant group. If my son, or any child, can be made to feel unwelcome here, then the problem isn't just in one dining room. It's in the system that runs it. From now on, that system answers to a different standard." Theo's fingers curled around his father's sleeve. For the first time in years, Paul placed his hand gently over his son's. Steady. In the front row stood Nia Johnson, not in her server's uniform, in a simple blue dress she had borrowed for the occasion. She hadn't wanted to come, but Theo had asked her. Paul turned to her. "I said thank you that night," he said, his voice lower now. "But it wasn't enough. You didn't just help Theo. You helped me see what I had stopped seeing." Nia shifted uncomfortably, unused to the attention. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady. "Compassion doesn't need wealth to be offered. But sometimes it needs power to be protected." The crowd murmured in approval. Some clapped softly. Paul nodded. "That's why we're starting the Theo Langford Initiative," he continued. "Every restaurant in this chain will receive mandatory training for supporting guests with special needs. That means sensory-friendly hours twice a week. Quiet menus on request, no sizzling pans, no flare plates. Table cards families can place that signals give space, no flashes, no questions. Staff trained to start with, "May I help from here?" Ask before entering a child's space. And the first community grant will go to expanding the sensory-friendly cafe Nia volunteers at, so more families like mine never have to feel they don't belong. The announcement rippled across the crowd. Reporters scribbled. Some parents in the audience quietly wiped tears. Theo shifted closer to Nia. He tapped twice on the sketch. "Yes." Then whispered, "Safe." Nia smiled, and for the first time since the story had gone viral, her eyes glistened. As the cameras rolled, Paul added one last line. Compassion isn't charity, it's courage, and I promise my son will grow up in a world where it isn't the exception. That night, the clip aired on national news under a new headline: Billionaire and Waitress join forces for change. Comments flooded in. This is what accountability looks like. Bless Nia for showing us all what dignity means. Theo's smile at the end broke me. And in a quiet moment, after the crowd dispersed, Nia sat with Theo at a corner booth, the same spot where he had once hidden his face in fear. Now he was sketching on a napkin, drawing the waitress's calm hands, and writing beneath it, in shaky letters, "Safe." That image, a child finding the word "safe," went viral again the next morning. But this time, it wasn't chaos driving the clicks. It was hope. Paul knelt beside his son, no longer the untouchable billionaire, just a father learning to listen. Nia stood nearby, still holding her apron in one hand. No medals, no applause, just quiet strength. For the first time, the entire room saw her, not as a waitress, not as an outsider, but as the one who showed them all what dignity looks like. In a world that measures worth by status and appearance, it's easy to forget that dignity isn't earned. It's owed. That night in the restaurant proved something many try to ignore. Compassion doesn't need a title. It doesn't wait for permission. It can come from the person everyone overlooks, the one carrying the tray, not the one signing the bill. Paul Langford had wealth. Nia Johnson had courage. And it was courage that saved a frightened boy and changed an entire room. This is Black Stories, where the underestimated rise, the powerful are humbled, and dignity finds its way home. If this story moved you, tap like so more people hear it. Subscribe to the channel because we share stories like this every week, and share this video. Because sometimes the smallest act of compassion can spark the biggest change.
Años exactamente, bueno, no exactamente, ¿no? Un grupo de soñadores en La Paz decidió fundar algo que trascendería generaciones. El glorioso Club Bolívar. No imaginaron que... Oye, me he esforzado al hacer el discurso. ¿Qué ponen ZZ, chat? Basta, me he esforzado, se los juro que me he esforzado, bro, basta. Por favor, me he esforzado en el discurso, respétenme un poquito, chat. Bueno, igual lo voy a leer, me la chupan, la verdad. Chat, nefastos. Son unos envidiosos, ¿saben? Son unos envidiosos. ¿En qué me quedé? No imaginaron que ese nombre se convertiría en un sinónimo de grandeza, lucha y de orgullo nacional. 101 años después, Bolívar no es solo un club. Es un sentimiento que se hereda, que se sufre y se celebra. Últimamente sufrimos mucho por Robato, ¿no? Es el latido de miles de hinchas que en cada victoria y en cada caída nunca abandonan, ¿verdad? Nomás. Porque ser celeste no es una elección, es una forma de vivir. Muy bien, qué lindo, un aplauso. Bravo, bravo. Muchachos, tremendo discurso. Buenas noches, Dieguito, ¿cómo estás? Por lo menos ponte tu chompita, pues, un busito para leer el discurso. A ver, cállate, Gabo, ¿vos quieres ser baneado? Este discurso lo he hecho en mi cama, pensando en lo que es ser bolivarista, la verdad. Un aplauso, por favor, y con ayuda también del gran ChatGPT. Un aplauso para ChatGPT. Ah, ¿cuál era la finalización de un ratito? Dice, que estos 101 años sean solo el comienzo de muchas más llenos de alegría. Felicidades, Academia. Felicidades, Bolívar. ¡Bravo! Aplausos para ChatGPT, muchachos. Para vos no, dice. Buenas noches, muchachos, ¿cómo están? Gracias por estar aquí, perdón por prender tan tarde. La verdad estaba viendo mi serie, estaba viendo el regreso de Justin Bieber. Bueno, toda la tarde me vi fútbol, hasta vi el partido del Tigre. Vi el partido de River, vi el partido de Oriente. Las declaraciones de Martins, tremendo lo de Martins, bebé, le tiró palo a Villegas, pero bien tirado. Huevada, en su cama lo hizo todo pajeado pensando en el... No, ¿qué dice este Arielito? Oye, ¿quiénes vamos, no? Mi sobrino de quién redacta mejor. Dile eso a ChatGPT, yo no he redactado. ¿Qué me estás molestando a mí? Felicidades. Qué basado. Pues la verdad nomás. ¿Qué quieren que les diga? A ver, ¿qué les puedo decir, muchachos? Yo no publiqué nada en mi página, la verdad no hice nada estos días. Han sido momentos difíciles. Bien triste, ¿no? Mentira. Pero no, muchachos, bueno. Quiero felicitar a todos los que son bolivaristas y hoy en día más que nunca, ¿no? Que es difícil ser bolivarista en el sentido de todo el contexto que estamos pasando con el técnico. Pero si lo ven por el otro lado también hay que sentirnos orgullosos porque hemos llegado a estos 101 años. Creo que como la institución mejor parada, tanto económicamente, futbolísticamente y dirigencialmente diría, pero no, creo que no, ahí nos falta, ¿no? Ese eslabón para poder ser una institución sólida. Y como ayer creo que lo decía Dardo Gómez en su publicación en el Cholet, que Dios mío, ¿de dónde cagan tanta plata, bebés? Más fuegos pirotécnicos que en el aniversario de La Paz, no mames. Tremendo, felicidades a los del Cholet y a ver si pasan pues algunos moneys. No mentira. Que dijo que el dirigente tiene que estar siempre al lado del hincha. Y eso es mucha verdad. Y no es por darle palo a Claure, porque él tendrá sus funciones, las cosas que tienen que hacer. Pero creo que por esa parte que estoy... Uy, ¿qué? No, todavía no va a arrancar la fiesta, Tucán, tranquilo. y por esa parte creo que está bien, ¿no? Está bien. Y bueno, se vienen unas futuras elecciones donde el principal candidato es Dardo Gómez a seguir manejando lo que es este club tan bonito que es Bolívar, ¿no? Por detrás, obviamente, yo creo que tiene que haber gente que lo asesore. Espera, ¿mi gatita se echó pipí? No, ya, más bien. Me ha asustado, chicos, la verdad, me ha asustado. Ya saben ustedes, rayada está mi gatita últimamente, ¿no? No, ¿qué dice este Eddie Pox? Y bueno, muchachos, nos espera, creo, un futuro grandioso. Yo lo dije, creo que esta es una oportunidad ya con el Stadium de una vez establecernos como un club de fútbol, pero serio, y fuera de ser autosostenible, que se proyecte a más, ¿me entiendes? No estancarnos en solo ser un club boliviano, sino ya empezar a soñar con, no sé, a ver, por ejemplo, la venta de butacas en el estadio, venta de marketing, merchandising, que se vaya ampliando más las sociedades, ¿me entienden? O sea, yo creo que si una cabeza maneja bien todo eso, creo que podemos despegar, ¿me entiendes? Y no estar ahí creando leyes de mierda con el gobierno, pidiendo perdón para que nos perdonen los impuestos, ¿no? Los gatos, ¿no? Entonces, creo que, o ser un club que está a punto de desaparecer, como Wilstermann, que desapareció de la liga, pero está a punto de desaparecer, pero absolutamente de todo el fútbol. O ser clubes que le están mangueando el auspicio a la UTV, y chupándosela al presidente de la federación por subsistir. Entonces creo que Bolívar es muy grande y tiene, creo que, trascender. Eso es lo que nos falta, trascender, dar ese pasito para trascender y lograr los objetivos que siempre hemos querido, ya sea una Copa Sudamericana o una Copa Libertadores, ¿no? Y siempre tiene que ir de la mano. Estos últimos años, creo que es la verdad, se han ido alejando a las generaciones bolivaristas, al hincha común, al hincha fanático, a todos los tipos de hinchas se han ido alejando del club por justamente el mal trabajo que se ha ido realizando estos últimos años en Bolívar. ¿Qué decía Valdivia? Creo que dijo que dejó un club autosostenible. O sea, sí, no vamos a decir que no. Económicamente creo que se dejó un club autosostenible. A ver, Solís, no pidas Gartic, ya les he dicho qué cosa de Gartic. Hoy día es aniversario del club, déjame hablar a ver de mi club, Solís. Igual en el grupo de WhatsApp, no, Tucán, jugaremos Gartic. No quiero dibujar huevadas, déjame, no voy a jugar Gartic. Ya les he dicho, si quieren dibujar, agarren un cuadernito y empiezan a dibujar sus huevadas. No me vengan a molestar a mí con su Gartic. Saludos, Reyisita, ¿cómo estás? ¿Todo bien? Gartic, temática Bolívar. No, métanse su Gartic por el poto, ya les he dicho. Y bueno, muchachos, ¿en qué estaba? Es que me enerva, muchachos, cada vez Gartic, basta, no quiero jugar Gartic. Vayan a jugar Gartic con sus minas. Goclingo, huevadas hablas. Ya, espera, ¿qué hables, Ignacio Loza? Auri. Y bueno, muchachos, creo que sí, yo me quedo con eso. Este martes tenemos un partido muy importante en lo económico. Para mí, muy importante para ver qué está el club de cara a este año. Porque creo que es indispensable ganarle a ese equipo. en Copa Libertadores, obviamente por los 3 puntos y más. Pero pensando a futuro, creo que es muy importante que se vea buen fútbol, ¿no? Y que la gente ya esté un poquito más tranquila con el funcionamiento del equipo. Ayer contra Bebé, bueno, el día sábado contra Bebé, se jugó un buen partido, no digo que un malo partido. Creo que empezaron a aparecer personas, o bueno, jugadores que no estaban apareciendo, como es el Papu Velázquez y muchos más, ¿no? Entonces, interesante. Y bueno, apareció Cauterucho, que en el partido de Libertadores no había aparecido ni de sombra. Parece que Cauterucho solo le mete goles a equipos como ABB. Y preocupa un poquito eso, ¿no? Hoy ganó el Tigre, está puntero con nosotros. Nacional Potosí también está compartiendo la punta con nosotros y muchos más que vienen bien entonándose en lo que es este torneo, ¿no? Que empezó retardísimo y creo que nos va a pesar no solo a nosotros, sino a los demás equipos que están participando en copas internacionales, ya sea Blooming el caso, ¿no? Y otros más. Mete gol equipos chicos como Dorni, pero Dorni ni jugó. ¿Qué dicen, chicos? ¿Qué dicen? La era Robato es la peor de todos los tiempos, bebé. Tomando en cuenta el centenario que es una vez en la vida. Sí, es la peor. La peor. De los últimos 10 años, ¿se podría decir que lo de Robato es lo peor que nos pudo pasar? A ver, piensen. Es que con lo que me dice el técnico de... A ver, ustedes pónganse a pensar, si tu técnico te dice que el objetivo era solo clasificar a Libertadores y que no estaba obligado a ser campeón, puta, ahí me la bajó mal, amigos, sinceramente, me la bajó mal. Podía aceptarle todas sus huevadas y todo, pero cuando dijo eso, es como que hizo sentir me hizo sentir un club más del montón, ¿me entiendes? Un Nacional Potosí, una Aurora, no sé, otros equipos bien X. Así me hizo sentir, la verdad. Por eso yo vuelvo a repetir, yo voy a hablar de lo que veo en la cancha, y este martes, si es que Bolívar gana, se va a aplaudir, y si es que Bolívar pierde, bueno, también se va a criticar algunas cosas, y si han fallado en algunas cosas, igual vamos a criticarlas, vamos a observarlas y vamos a dar nuestro criterio. Pero fuera de eso, Robato no puede venir a achicar el club, ¿me entiendes? O sea, creo que hemos tenido el parámetro y la vara de estos últimos años, bueno, desde que yo nací, desde que voy a la cancha, creo que el parámetro ha sido que Bolívar siempre salga campeón, ¿no?